Now, my first guest today is Margee Ensign, president of the American University of Nigeria in Yola. She's been numerously cited for her leadership role in using education to promote peace and community development in Nigeria. She's also been honored with awards in Nigeria and beyond for successfully aligning the development mission and core values of the American University to the specific needs of Adamawa State, where the AUN is located. And she's been particularly noted for her leading role in helping thousands of refugees fleeing the Boko Haram insurgency, and for her contributions to the education of women and girls in Nigeria. But it's in her role helping the escaped and freed Chibok girls gain scholarships to continue their education in defiance of Boko Haram militants and their threats that she's probably most cited. And Margee Ensign, president of the American University in Nigeria, Yola, joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Fascinating story you've got there. Let's take it bit by bit. First of all, you've been reappointed as president of the American University of Nigeria, Yola, so congratulations are in order. And the board said that you have the best credentials to lead the university into the future. That's pretty flattering, isn't it?
It is. Thank you.
And just looking at how you got to Yola, I mean, we're going to talk about the fascinating things that you've done, but just looking at how you got to Yola, you resigned your presidency.
I did.
Of Dickinson College in the US. It's a very old, very distinguished liberal arts college. I had a liberal arts education, so I know the value of things like that. But you gave that up and to come and lead the American University in Yola. That was 2010 or so. I mean, was that?
I started at AUN in 2010 and went through 2017 and then went home to my country to see what I could do and be with family. And I was at Dickinson College, as you say, is actually the first college in America after we became a country. So 1783. It's a very old and distinguished place. And then I left very recently. So I was there for 4 years. And as you say, I came back to AUN.
Well, first of all, let's get to the provenance of your sort of leaving in America. Why did you decide to leave such a distinguished university and come to Nigeria? That's not saying that American University isn't distinguished, but what made you decide to leave?
Well, first of all, there's some parallels between the two. And one of the reasons I took the Dickinson position were really three reasons. One, it believes in global education like we do. Every young person, as you know, we live in a globalized world. So every young person has to be exposed to people all over the world.
Ought to be exposed.
But we'll do our best. Second, there are two other missions there that we believe in at AUN. One is sustainability. Every young person has to understand how we build a sustainable world. The third was we believe firmly there at Dickinson and same at AUN in, we call it civic learning in action, making sure you take the knowledge from the classroom and immediately apply it to community-based problems. The man who founded Dickinson College believed the same thing that the founder of AUN did, that education, the purpose of education is really to make sure you have a useful education for the common good. So there's a lot of parallels between Dickinson and AUN. But I came back because I also believe in AUN. I believe deeply in the mission. I believe in Nigeria. I believe in your young people.
Yeah, but what about
here.
the first time that you came? I mean, you hadn't experienced Nigeria at
Well,
that time, had you?
here's why I came the first time, because there's only one university in the world, not just sub-Saharan Africa, not just in Africa, that says our mission is to be a development university, to make sure every graduate goes out with the same passion, the knowledge to apply it immediately to local problems and then scaled up to larger national and global. And we've done it. Our alums are really extraordinary. They're everywhere from Google to banking to starting new startups in Lagos. So I think I'm proud of our alums, and I wanted to come back and make sure we continue that development work.
Yeah, but what made you come in the first place?
That was it. It was the mission. There is no other university that
does
says
that.
We don't just believe in teaching and learning. We don't just believe in research, the two major pillars of a university. We are a development university. We want to make sure these graduates have not just the knowledge, but the experience.
Yeah, but were you daunted by the fact that you were going into an insurgency zone? Clearly, I mean, there were things going on that
Right.
you were one part of your experience of life.
Well, I was privileged to grow up in a family where both of my parents were airline pioneers, early in that industry. My mom was a flight attendant when you had to be an RN, and my dad helped start an airline in the United States. So as a young child, I was privileged to travel everywhere. And a vacation for us was, I want to see Russia. I want to see China. So I don't know, I have a strange gene in me that says, let's go to interesting places.
Right. You like to sort of like adventure and all of that. Was that the...
That was perhaps part of it, but I did my research before I came out to Nigeria. You're going to be the third largest country in the world in the second half of this century. Nigeria will play a role on the global stage that it never has before. So to be president of then a relatively young university with a completely different mission for higher education, it was irresistible.
And you were talking about the educational philosophy at the American university. Obviously an American style education.
Exactly.
But is it, you mentioned that it tries to deal with and solve the crucial economic, social and political challenges that are unique to Nigeria and that beset this country and the region.
Absolutely. So let me just tell you about some of the projects that our students have started, all right? During the insurgency, as you mentioned, 300,000 people came to our town, right? The world didn't know.
That's Yola.
That was Yola. The international community didn't know. This was in 2013 and 2014. It's a very peaceful place now, let me say. But 300,000 people were there. Who was going to feed them? Who was going to educate the children? No one was there. So I turned to my students and our faculty and I said, can you do it? We'll go to school all day, but in the afternoon and evening, can you feed people? Can you find ways to educate children? Let's do it now. Let's take that knowledge and see if we can do it. I'm extraordinarily proud of what our students and faculty did. We fed those 300,000 people. 2 died, and that was terrible. But with 300,000, that was pretty amazing. We had 30,000 children alone, and it gets to some of the issues you're dealing with right now in the country. They had either lost their parents when they ran, or their parents were dead. And they were on the street. And so our students and faculty put together something called TELA, Technology Enhanced Learning for All. And it was both sophisticated technology for young people who had computers, very few. We were able to get, with the help of my government, some funding for the computers, but it was primarily radio-based, right? I'll tell you, I have a picture I carry on my laptop I look at every morning. It was these refugee kids sitting under a tree with their radio. Their facilitator hadn't shown up that day. And they so wanted the lesson, they didn't have an antenna. They went out and found an old hanger and put it on to make an antenna. The gains, the educational gains of that teleproject in the first 6 months, 97% increase in reading scores, 96% in numeracy. We can educate all those young people using a variety of technologies.
Well, that's very impressive, but also hugely informative, what you're saying. But of course, a crucial part of that is training a new generation of leaders for this country. Has that training manifested itself successfully yet? Have any of your students been inspired by the obvious need for leadership and service in Nigeria and crossed over into prominent public service yet?
They are. They're in business, they're in government, they're in academia, both in Nigeria and out. I'm amazed at the emails I've received since coming back from these young people. They're teaching all over the world. They've started businesses. As I said, one has a tech startup in Lagos. They understand. They are the next generation of leaders. And the percentage of young people in Nigeria who get a world-class education like they do at AUN is this much. So they know they have to step up and apply and become the leaders that Nigeria needs.
But I mean, are there any of them that you can point to?
There's
and
one
say
at Google.
They're in politics. They're making a difference.
They're in
that
politics.
area.
One ran recently, I believe, in Adamawa. They're in business. They're in government. One's senior at Google. So they're everywhere. They're where they should be.
Right. So the educational focus is multi-layered.
Absolutely.
In terms of its measurable impact on society. There is the Yola community.
Exactly.
Then there is the rest of Nigeria and the rest of the world. So a sort of concentric ring approach.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Well, if you start in your community, if you're a young person, if you're 17, and you're in the middle of a major humanitarian crisis, and you personally have taught a young, let me give you a story, taught a young person how to read.
Briefly, because we're going to take a break in a minute.
Very briefly, I was teaching in 2016, and a young man whose dad owned an oil company was in my development class, and I walked him down to feed and read. That's exactly what it is. 1 meal a day for children on the street and to teach them how to read. He did his work, he came back to the next class, and he said, "I'm so angry." I said, "Why are you angry?" He said, "How is it possible a 12-year-old in my country has never seen a book?" He said, "I'm not going into business. I will reform education." That's the impact of this education.
That's a very impressive thing. And I don't know how much time, I think we've got a couple of minutes or so before we have to take a break. Okay, let's take a break. But when we come back, I want to talk about the impact in the region with Boko Haram and all the rest of them and the Chibok girls. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Margee Ensign, President of the American University of Nigeria in Yola. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, as you know, Nigeria has been terrorized for more than a decade by the militant Islamist group Boko Haram, which opposes Western influence in Nigeria. In April 2014, it attacked a girls' school in Chibok in a midnight raid that led to the abduction of more than 200 schoolgirls. More than 7 years later, dozens of the girls have still not been set free, but some of them had managed to escape and got released, but had been warned not to return to school. But several of them defied the militants. They were encouraged by my first guest today, Margee Ensign, President of the American University in Yola, who arranged scholarships for many of the girls to study at the university in northeast Nigeria. And Margee Ensign, President of the American University of Nigeria, Yola, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. We'll talk about the girls in a minute, but let's just talk about the impact in the region where the AUN is located, which is, of course, the northeast region, an area ravaged by years of insurgency and violence. Do you model AUN education as a counterpoint to the radicalization that has germinated and flourished in the Northeast?
The purpose of any education is to teach young people to open their minds, to look at multiple perspectives, to search for the truth. So I don't know if we are explicitly poised to be, we are actually, right? We're not there to teach students there's one way to live. We're there to teach them about how to think, how to learn, and how to apply their knowledge, and to be able to compete not just nationally, but with any young person globally. So I think that's quite different, and you know, the reasons young people join Boko Haram is because they don't have access to that education. They don't have income.
Absolutely. And of course, you've become known for your association with the escaped Chibok girls and the way that you led the fight for the continued education of those abducted girls. You opened the American University to them, and I understand that the first of them graduated recently. Tell us about that remarkable experience.
Well, let me tell you about the one who graduated, Mary. Mary graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting, and she's actually working with us at AUN. But as I was sharing with you during...
That her on the screen?
Yes, that's Mary. As I was sharing with you during the break, I had the privilege last Sunday of sitting with Mary and a whole group of Chibok women. They're not girls. They're strong, determined, resilient women. And Mary was giving them pointers about how to be successful at college. Study widely, use the writing center. And then she said something that almost brought tears to my eyes. She said, study abroad. I studied in Rome. I learned a new language. I saw the Vatican. And I thought, we have to change this narrative, because we've talked a lot about their kidnapping and the trauma, and we should always recognize that. But these are women who defied that, and now they're strong and determined, and they're going to go out. Let me just tell you what some of her friends said. I went around the room and said, "What are you studying?" One said, "I'm studying natural and environmental science because I'm worried about the planet. I'm studying law so I can bring justice to my community. I'm studying accounting so I can stop corruption." They're determined, and they too will be the future leaders of your country.
And what was it that made you or moved you to offer these girls scholarships?
How dare anyone try to take education away from any young person? I was angry when it happened. And the sequence of when we went to get them, it was actually a female security guard who came to me one day in my office and said, "You know, President Ensign, you keep talking about being a development university. How are you going to help my sister?" I said, "I don't know your sister." And she said she escaped from Boko Haram. No one knew. The world didn't know. So we spent that summer talking to parents who had to think twice about whether they were going to allow their young women then to come back to college. And I applaud those parents, because that had to be extraordinarily difficult.
Absolutely.
So we can't be intimidated by these people.
But I mean, you had to physically travel to Chibok to, first of all, reassure the parents and to bring the girls to the campus in Yola on a bus. How much of a personal risk was that for you, driving through what clearly was Boko Haram territory?
Well, at least we did one thing right. We covered the AUN sign on the bus, so no one knew the American University of Nigeria was up in the northeast looking for these women.
Well, here you were, an obvious foreigner sitting in the car.
It's true, that's true. I don't know. They were in the area. The police were supposed to go with us that morning in a convoy and decided not to. So my chief security officer, Dr. Rollins, and I had a big decision to make that morning. I'll always remember, did we go? And there was no question that those women were going to come to AUN. Robert Smith, who's a philanthropist in the US, supported that first group. He called me out of the blue and said, "Just tell me what you need to support them." I've never had support like that. And of course, your government. The Victim Support Fund, the Ministry of Women has been doing incredible work supporting them. So like anything, it's not about an individual. It's not about a few people. It's about a whole community supporting these women to make sure they get to live the lives that they want to.
And what's life been like for them at university? I mean, these were basically rural women. Chibok is, I've been to Chibok. It's a very remote town, far from, many places.
I think the first few years were very challenging for them. Just in terms of basic education, English, spoken English, and writing, and the trauma they went through. But they certainly supported each other. They're very religious women. They helped each other through the trauma. When a parent died or a sibling, I would be with them often and would come together, and they prayed. That's how they made it through. So those early years had to be extremely difficult, but now on campus, you wouldn't know who the Chibok women are. And that's the way it should be.
So they've got over their trauma, basically.
I don't know if you ever get over that trauma, but they are certainly so much a part of the AUN community that there's no distinction.
They've learned
really
to cope with it.
Yes.
And you must be hearing about all the recent spate of abductions of school children.
Absolutely.
in the north. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, a journalist asked me yesterday, is it right to close the schools to protect the children? I said, think about that question. If an airport were threatened, if the Hilton Hotel were threatened, would we close it? No, you'd protect it. And so that's really the challenge right now, is how we protect those young people. Until that happens, they have to be safe. But learning is being lost, and there are solutions, as you and I talked about, to make sure these young people, like in America during the pandemic when we were completely locked down, there are solutions, and we all need to move quickly to make sure we keep those young people learning. That's
a very good point. But I mean, you talked about protection. Is your university well protected? I mean, you're sitting in Yola there. I understand Boko Haram have come close to the university a number of times. I mean, you're an obvious target.
We have probably, as a former U.S. ambassador described, the best security force in the region, trained by an American, Dr. Rollins, extraordinary. In the community, we all watch out for each other. We have a peace initiative of Muslims and Christians, and we make sure that we do our very best to keep Yola safe. But I don't want your viewers to think Yola is not a peaceful place. It's a very peaceful place, but it's peaceful in part because we protect ourselves.
And when you talk about well-trained security guards, are they armed?
They are not, no, but they have been trained by one of the best Americans, and they make sure they know where those people are who would want to harm anyone.
Right, and of course we've got about a minute, less than
Sure.
a minute left for the chat. You've been at the helm of the American University now for several years. Have you seen more support in the community and the region for the education of girls, possibly as a result of the work that you're doing at that university?
Absolutely. You know, when I first got there, the percentage of girls as to compared to boys was quite low. It isn't anymore. And you know why that's important. When girls are educated, their families are healthier over time. They bring in income. Infant and child mortality go down. And now there's new research from the World Bank that shows when women are educated, corruption is reduced. We have to make sure we get all the girls and boys in your country educated.
I want to thank you very much indeed and to congratulate you on the work that you're doing. Margee Ensign is the president of the American University of Nigeria in Yola.